Gluttony isn't just about food. It's the endless need to consume more. More attention, more emotion, more people watching and never looking away. For decades, Oprah Winfrey stood at the center of every controversy untouched, reframing predators, humiliation, and outrage as empathy, healing, and misunderstanding. That's the story you were told. I worked behind the scenes at Harpo Studios. I helped shape the moments millions consumed every day. And what I saw there taught me this. Some hungers don't crave bodies, they crave audiences. And once you realize what's feeding, it's already too late to stop watching. People my age remember where they were the first time they saw her in person. At Harpo Studios, that memory happened every single day. I worked there for years, long enough to forget that most Americans only experience that building through a screen. For them, it was a place of answers, a sanctuary in the middle of the workday. For the audience that lined up before sunrise, teachers on personal days, retirees clutching tickets like communion wafers, nurses coming off night shifts, this wasn't just a show. It was an appointment, a chance to sit in the same room as the woman who had narrated their marriages, their divorces, their diets, their grief. The crowd always arrived early, not restless, eager, smiling, polite in that practiced Midwestern way. People hugged strangers, shared snacks, whispered stories about episodes that had changed their lives. You could feel it building, that collective leaning forward, like everyone was preparing to receive something they trusted would make them feel full by the time they left. My job as a senior segment producer wasn't glamorous. I didn't write monologues or ask questions. I managed flow, timing, emotional pacing, making sure the audience stayed engaged without burning out. You learned quickly that a crowd could be pushed too hard or not hard enough. Either way, they left unsatisfied. There was a phrase used around the studio, usually said under someone's breath when a segment felt flat. Don't let them cool off. No one ever explained what that meant. You didn't need them to. From the control room, I watched the audience settle into their seats. Their faces glowed under the lights, already smiling before anything happened. They weren't here to be surprised. They were here to be guided, to be reassured, to be stirred just enough that they'd leave buzzing, talking all the way to the parking lot. When Oprah walked out, the reaction wasn't loud at first. It was deeper than that. A collective inhale, like a room that had been waiting all morning to breathe at the same time. She didn't rush. She never did. She let the silence stretch, let the anticipation thicken. You could see it on the audience's faces, people gripping armrests, leaning forward, nodding before she even spoke, hanging on her posture, her expression, the way she stood like someone who already knew how the conversation would end. From a production standpoint, it was flawless. From a human one, it was overwhelming. I'd grown up watching her. Everyone had. Daytime television was background noise in our homes, but her voice cut through it. She spoke the language of reflection, of personal responsibility, of improvement. She made pain feel organized, manageable, like something you could set down once it had been named. Working there, you told yourself that was a good thing. Backstage was quieter. Carpeted corridors, soft lighting, the hum of equipment bleeding through walls. Guests waited with handlers who spoke gently, reassuringly, repeating phrases we'd all memorized. You're safe here. This is a conversation. She wants to understand you. I believed that, for a while. I remember the first time I saw Oprah backstage without the lights on her. No audience, no applause, just a brief pass in the hallway between segments. She nodded at someone, smiled at someone else, adjusted an earpiece. Professional, efficient, nothing unsettling about it. At least that's what I told myself then. Looking back now, what stands out isn't anything she did. It's what I didn't feel. People talk about warmth when they describe her. A presence, a comfort. Standing 10 feet away in that hallway, I felt none of it. No ease, no familiarity, just a strange neutrality, like standing near a powerful piece of machinery that wasn't meant to notice you. She passed me without stopping. Her eyes flicked in my direction, brief, assessing, then moved on. No smile, no acknowledgement. At the time, I chalked it up to nerves. My own, not hers. It was easy to explain away. You didn't work at Harpo without learning how to explain things away. The show went on. The audience responded exactly as expected. Laughter rose and fell on cue. Silence landed where it needed to. When someone cried, it felt communal, almost comforting. People reached for each other's hands. Heads nodded in unison. By the end, they looked satisfied. Not happy, exactly. Relieved, like something inside them had been addressed. As they filed out, I heard the same comments I'd heard 100 times before. She said exactly what I needed to hear. I feel lighter. I could have stayed all day. That last one stuck with me. Later, after the studio emptied and the lights dimmed, I walked the same backstage corridor again. I paused where I'd seen Oprah earlier, tried to summon that sense of admiration I knew I was supposed to feel. It didn't come. What did come, quietly, without explanation, was the realization that I never had, even at the beginning. Even before I knew what questions were really being asked, or how carefully moments were shaped, or how much effort went into keeping people wanting more, I'd mistaken familiarity for comfort. And as I headed back toward my desk, preparing the next rundown, I noticed something else for the first time. Some segments weren't labeled by topic, they were labeled by appetite. That was when I started paying closer attention to what happened after the cameras stopped, and why, no matter how much was given to them, the audience always came back hungry. Once you notice appetite, you start seeing it everywhere. In the control room, ratings weren't discussed the way people think. We didn't talk about numbers first. We talked about reaction, how quickly it arrived, how long it lingered, whether it felt satisfying or thin. There were days when a segment tested well but was still considered a failure because it didn't hold people. Not through logic, through feeling. That was when the editing mattered most. The post-production floor sat below the main studio, past a door most producers never needed to badge through. It was quieter down there, not peaceful, contained. Like a pantry you didn't open unless you were preparing something specific. I went down one afternoon to retrieve a master cut after a timing issue. The hallway felt wrong immediately. The warmth of the studio didn't reach that far. The air felt flat, heavy, as if sound itself had been pressed thinner. Inside the edit bay, a single editor worked in silence. No music, no chatter, just footage looping on 2 monitors. On one screen, a guest from the week before spoke calmly, firmly, pushing back against a question that had gone too far. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't defensive. He was asserting himself. On the second screen, the version that aired, he looked smaller. His pause was gone. His resistance replaced with a stitched apology made from words he'd said earlier in a different context. I didn't understand how clean it was, not censored, reframed. That's not what he said, I muttered. The editor didn't look up. It's what landed better. For who? For the room. He dragged the timeline back and removed a single breath between sentences. The change was subtle, almost invisible. But when he played it again, the guest's composure collapsed. The audience reaction swelled right on cue. I felt my stomach tighten. On the wall behind him were folders labeled with terms that weren't editorial at all. Words that described states, conditions, needs. Each folder held dozens of short clips, hesitations, tears, micro smiles, voices breaking at just the right pitch. I asked what they were used for. Reference, he said. You don't want to guess what works. You want to recognize it. Upstairs, the show felt different after that. I noticed how questions were shaped to guide people into familiar emotional postures, how Oprah waited, not out of kindness, but patience, until someone filled the silence the way the room wanted. She watched the audience more than the guest. Always had. Guests left grateful, almost giddy. like they'd been emptied and refilled with something simpler, something easier to carry. One sent a note later saying, "I don't know why I said some of that, but I feel better." That night I rewatched old episodes at home. Ones I'd seen before, ones I thought I understood. I started pausing at random. Once, just once, the image went dark for a single frame. Not static, not a glitch, just black. The next morning I mentioned it to a producer I trusted. She didn't ask which episode, she just said, "You don't rewind that." Why? Because it means the crowd got what it came for. That was the moment I understood the show wasn't designed to inform or heal. It was designed to satisfy. And once you've learned how to do that, stopping doesn't feel like an option. It feels like starvation. The energy changed when celebrities came in. You could feel it before they even stepped onto the lot. Security tightened, staff straightened up, voices lowered. It wasn't excitement exactly, it was tension. Entertainers didn't come to Harpo the way regular guests did. They came guarded, prepared, aware that whatever happened on that stage would follow them forever. Rappers got it the worst. I didn't understand why at first. On paper, their segments were framed as conversations about accountability, influence, or culture. But backstage, the tone shifted. Questions were sharper, the room colder. There was less reassurance, less patience. Like the show expected resistance and wanted to test it. I remember one rapper arriving early, sitting alone in the green room with his hands folded, jaw set. He'd been briefed, but not comforted. No one told him Oprah was safe. No one told him this was a conversation. They told him to be respectful, to listen carefully, to remember where he was. He nodded, but his eyes never stopped moving. From the control room, I watched Oprah adjust the rhythm the moment he walked out. She didn't smile the same way. She didn't soften the room. She let the audience sit in a low, anticipatory silence that felt almost punitive. When she asked about his lyrics, her tone wasn't curious, it was corrective. The audience reacted immediately. Not laughter, not applause, approval. It struck me then how different this was from other guests. Celebrities weren't there to be understood. They were there to be measured, to be brought down to scale, to be reminded that fame didn't exempt them from being shaped. The more guarded they were, the harder the questions came. I saw it with actors too, though they hid it better. Broadway performers, pop stars, people trained to perform vulnerability on command. They recognized the cadence, the pauses, the pressure points. Some tried to play along, others froze, a few fought back. Those moments never aired. One afternoon, during a rehearsal run, a celebrity guest pushed back on a question that crossed a line. He did it politely, firmly. He said he wasn't comfortable going there. In the control room, no one spoke. Oprah waited. The silence stretched. The audience leaned forward. He filled it. Later, in the edit bay, I watched that exchange disappear. The refusal gone, the boundary erased. What remained was a version of him that looked smaller, more compliant. "That's why they come," an associate producer said quietly beside me. "They think it's good for their image." "For who?" I asked. She didn't answer. There was something else I started noticing, something harder to explain. Certain celebrities left the stage shaken in a way that didn't match the conversation. Not angry, not embarrassed, drained. They'd sit backstage afterward, staring at nothing, breathing like they'd just run a long distance. A few asked for water, some asked to leave immediately. One rapper paced the hallway and muttered, "I shouldn't have said that," over and over, like he couldn't remember deciding to. Another asked me, half joking, if the room was wired differently. I laughed at the time. I stopped laughing when I realized how often the same thing happened. The show loved entertainers because they brought something the audience craved: recognition, familiar faces, existing attention that could be redirected, concentrated, intensified. When a celebrity broke down, the reaction doubled. When they resisted, it sharpened. It wasn't just the story, it was the contrast. Power meeting power, and only one side ever won. Backstage, I overheard a senior staffer say, "They taste different." I asked what he meant. He shrugged. "They already come in full." That night, I replayed a segment with a rapper who'd gone quiet halfway through the interview. I watched his eyes dart toward the audience, then away. I noticed how Oprah leaned in, not to comfort, but to close the distance. How the crowd responded like they'd been waiting for that exact moment. For the first time, I wondered if some guests felt it too. Not just pressure, recognition, as if part of them knew what the room was built for, and why, no matter how famous they were, they always left less than they arrived. The show wrapped late that afternoon. Not late by television standards, but late enough that the building started to exhale. Audience members filtered out in clusters, still smiling, still talking, carrying the aftertaste of the hour with them. Crew moved on instinct, coiling cables, lowering lights, already thinking about tomorrow. I took a shortcut backstage, one I rarely used. A narrow service corridor that cut behind wardrobe and storage. It shaved a minute off the walk, usually locked. That day it wasn't. The air changed as soon as I stepped into it. Not colder, thinner, like the building's usual hum had been turned down. My footsteps sounded wrong, too close to my ears. The lights were dimmer here, spaced farther apart, leaving pockets of shadow that felt intentional. Halfway down the corridor, I turned a corner and saw it. At the far end stood a figure, tall, wrong in its proportions, too still to be waiting. It wasn't hiding in shadow. It made the shadow. The light around it seemed to bend inward, as if the air itself preferred not to touch it. This wasn't a person caught in bad lighting. There was no outline I could settle on. No face, no movement, just presence. My body reacted before my thoughts did. My breath caught, my shoulders tightened. A pressure built behind my eyes, the way it does right before you realize you're being watched. The figure didn't turn. It receded, not walking, not stepping back. It pulled away from the hallway, retreating into a doorway that shouldn't have been open, like the space itself was drawing it in. The doorframe swallowed the darkness without resistance. A heartbeat passed. Then the door swung wider. Dr. Phil stepped out. He looked exactly the way he always did, neat, composed, unhurried, jacket smooth, tie straight. A faint smile that suggested a productive conversation had just ended. He walked toward me like nothing unusual had happened, like he hadn't just emerged from the same place the corridor had bent around. As he passed, he reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. Not a friendly pat, not a casual brush. A firm, deliberate contact, possessive in a way I didn't have language for yet. "Have a good day," he said. His voice was warm, reassuring, practiced. Then he kept walking, footsteps steady, disappearing back into the familiar warmth of the main hallway. I stood there frozen, my skin buzzing where his hand had been. I turned back to the doorway. It was still open. Inside wasn't a room. There were no walls, no floor, no depth I could measure, just a complete absence, black without texture, without reflection, like a hole cut out of the building and left unfinished. Sound died at its edge. The hum of the studio didn't reach it. My ears rang in the silence. My body screamed at me to stay where I was. My breath went shallow, barely moving. My mouth dried instantly, tongue heavy. My legs felt locked, as if stepping forward would require permission I didn't have. My hands tingled, nerves firing warnings faster than my thoughts could catch up. This wasn't fear of being attacked. It was certainty. Certainty that if I crossed that threshold, whatever stepped back out wouldn't be me anymore. Not broken, not hurt, replaced. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds, minutes. Time didn't behave properly in that corridor. Then, from inside the void, I felt it. Not a sound exactly, a sensation, a subtle rhythm, like pressure releasing, like satisfaction, almost like chewing. And with it came a thought, not spoken, not heard, but placed gently behind my eyes, as familiar as hunger. More. The word lingered after I backed away, after I turned and walked as calmly as I could back toward the light, after the hallway's warmth returned and the building pretended nothing had happened. But the certainty stayed with me, that whatever lived behind that door didn't wander. It was housed, and people like Dr. Phil didn't serve it out of belief. They served it because it worked, and because someone, somewhere above all of this, knew exactly how to keep it fed. My last day at Harpo didn't feel dramatic. No farewell cake, no speeches, just a cardboard box under my desk and a badge that already felt lighter in my hand. People assumed I'd found a better opportunity. In this business, leaving quietly was the closest thing to success. The studio, though, was anything but quiet. That day's episode had been promoted for weeks. Health, bodies, truth, the kind of topic that pulled everyone in. Supporters, critics, people watching just to feel something together. You could sense it in the building. The same anticipatory hum I'd felt for years, only louder, hungrier. Backstage, staff moved with purpose. The audience was already seated, buzzing, leaning forward before a single light came on. America was waiting to be told how to feel about itself again. I was carrying my box toward the exit when I saw her. Oprah stood just off stage, reviewing notes she didn't need. Calm, centered, perfectly timed. The same presence that had shaped decades of television waited to step back into the light. I stopped. She noticed immediately. "What is it?" she asked, not impatient, curious, like she was gauging a variable. I didn't accuse her. I didn't mention corridors or doors, or the man who'd brushed past me hours earlier. I asked the only question that had been sitting in my chest since the beginning. "Do you think I'm fat?" The word landed heavier than I expected. For the first time, she really looked at me, not kindly, not warmly, precisely, like she was examining why I'd chosen that question, that moment. A smile touched her face, not comforting, not cruel, understanding. "That's what you think this is about?" she said softly. She explained it the way she explained everything, calm, practical, as if she were describing weather patterns. People didn't come for answers, she said. They came to be measured, compared, named, to feel the relief of being told where they stood. Bodies were just the doorway. Shame kept people watching longer than hunger ever could. Empathy made them stay. "It doesn't care what the feeling is," she continued, eyes flicking toward the stage where the audience waited, "only that they feel it together." I realized then she wasn't defending herself. She wasn't confessing. She was managing. A voice over the speakers called her name. 30 seconds. She handed the moment back to me like it was a finished transaction. "You should go," she said. "You look lighter already." She stepped into the lights. The applause hit like a wave. I lifted my box and walked toward the exit. Through the glass, I could see the audience rising, faces glowing, mouths open in anticipation. I looked back once, not at the stage, at her, at the patience, the warmth, the listening face that never blinked first. That was when I understood what I'd been standing next to all those years. Not evil, not rage, an appetite that never learned the word enough. I pushed through the doors and out into the street. Behind me, the show continued. Phones lit up, screens flickered. People leaned closer, everywhere at once. I had left the building. The broadcast didn't need me anymore. It was already being fed.